You're listening to REIA Radio, the nationally trusted name in real estate investing. We dig deep to discover investors' why in real estate. If you want to skip all the BS and get in investors' heads, you're in the right spot. Be one of the thousands to check out REIARadio.com.
If you buy a property and say real estate's the greatest thing ever, which by the way, I still stand by it is, go ahead and look it up, ChatGPT it, talk to whoever you want to. If you have a good financial advisor who also invests in real estate, go ahead and ask him. He will tell you real estate's phenomenal, but you have to have patience. The problem with that is if you buy an asset at the top of the market and you can't add any value, you are really beholden to what happens in the market. So what builds in this mitigated risk is to make sure you have value to add. So even if the value comes down, when you bought that $8 million property, let's say the interest rate stayed the same and you fixed it all up, it's worth $10 million. And then interest rates skyrocket, which means cap rates skyrocket, which means the value goes down. Well, now your value goes down to $9 million, but you bought it for $8. You had that mitigated risk because you're actually adding value. I hope that resonates.
He's actually one of my first clients that I started working with when I became a realtor. We learned side by side a lot over the years. In fact, I think you were the first person I ever seen write a creative contract, a creative financing contract. He was like, hey, here's my offer 1, here's my offer 2, and here's my offer 3. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, man, you make it so complicated. But that creative financing got him great deals and got him where he is. And let's just say when I saw that stuff, my brain exploded a little bit. He's smart, he's sharp, and he's quick with a joke. But more than that, he's one of those kindest people I know and someone I continue to look up to this day. Chris Palmley is the co-founder and director of investment strategy at Leavenwealth Capital, a company that owns 3,300 units over 7 states with over $330 million in assets under management. He is also the co-founder of Liquid Lending Solutions, a private lending company that's funded over 500 investor loans and totaling over $100 million. Oh, and that's not enough. He's a U.S. Army veteran, has a law degree, and holds a master's degree in negotiation from Creighton University. So basically, he's that guy you want to have on your side of the closing table or in a bar fight. So I've never seen him in a fight, but it sounded good. Today, Chris is going to walk us through how to structure creative deals, raise capital the right way, and protect yourself legally as you scale. And please give it up for someone who has truly mastered the art of the deal, Chris Palmley.
All right, stand up, please. Awesome. Sit down. Sit down. I got your attention. You can sit down, man. I like your... You're an idiot. What are you doing? How could you be doing this with your life? This is what was told to me in 2019 when I sat down with my family. And I said, you know that whole attorney thing that put me in 6 figures of debt? I'm going to quit being an attorney. I'm going into real estate. Now, 5 years later, actually, probably only 2 years later, my family shared with me that they always had faith in me because they knew that I wouldn't let it fail. But what the hell are you doing? Because this is such a risky business. You've heard the first 2 speakers. They didn't get up here and tell you how awesome everything is. They told you how things go wrong, and you got to be strong. I'm so thankful I took that leap. And this isn't fluff. I have nothing to sell you. I hope you hire Andy Corey. We hired him for over 400 units in Des Moines. He is absolutely crushed. We've owned 326 unit portfolio. We bought there a year ago. We have over $50,000 more in income every month from Andy's systems. What does Andy have to sell you? A badass property management company. I have nothing to sell you. I'm just super excited for you for being here because I promise you I was in that seat. And I will continue to be in that seat. So I really appreciate you showing up. If you can grab 1 or 2 nuggets today, I promise you it'll make this worth everything. Whether you're here for the credits or you're here to learn, this is worth your time. So he went over my resume here. I was an attorney for 10 years. I was a divorce attorney. So sorry if I helped you get or hurt you get a divorce. But I don't miss it at all. But I'm glad that I partook in that. The main thing I wanted to concentrate on was growing wealth for my family. And then it became so addicting, I wanted to help grow wealth for other people. And that's what put me in this position. Today, I'm going to cover creative financing, negotiation techniques, value add opportunities, and legal structuring. Creative financing is near and dear to my heart. I'm glad Ted told that story about me doing that. It still happens to this day. Whether it's a 5 unit or a 500 unit, well, let's go 20 unit or 200 unit. I'll still do that, and I'll get into it. But it's about being creative, because I can tell you when I got started, I didn't have any money. In fact, one of the first deals I did, and Jerry, I hope you don't mind me sharing some of this information. I started in real estate in 2013 doing single-family homes. And of course, at that time, I was an attorney. I had just gotten out of the military. I actually lived in my mom's basement. I was 30 years old for 7 months. I could not get a job because every attorney firm I applied to said, "What's your experience?" And I had just gotten out of the military, so I could sleep in the forest and perhaps kill somebody, but I had never practiced law. And so it was extremely difficult to get that job. Finally, 7 months in, I got a little bit of help. I joined a firm, and then I joined a national firm 4 months later, which is kind of disgusting. I got 4 months of experience. Now all of a sudden, I have enough experience for a national firm. It's kind of backwards. But at that same time is when I started real estate. I started doing single-family homes. Why? It's the lowest barrier of entry. And I still think it's worth your time today, no doubt, because I learned a lot. What I didn't do correctly, but I was trying to play safe, make some money on attorney. I was engaged at the time, so I was trying to play smart, is I started doing everything myself. So basically, I was being an attorney 60 hours a week, and then at night and on the weekends, I was working on my real estate career. And what that involved was single-family homes. And to break it down for you, and you've all heard of the Burr method, and if you haven't, here's what we were doing, and it worked. You'd buy a single-family home for $60,000, and yes, that was possible in 2013. You'd put $20,000 into it, so you're all in at $80,000, and you'd go to the bank and you'd say, "Hey, this thing's worth $100K." And they'd say, "You're right, it is. Here's an 80% loan." And they'd give me an $80,000 loan. So now I owned that single family for $0. That worked, and it worked very well, but 4 years later, because I'm the one laying the flooring, because I'm the one changing the toilets, only 4 years later I had 4 single-family homes, and I had built a process, but this was not going to help me scale wealth, and it certainly was going to help me scale my business. So that's when I jumped into multifamily. If I could rewind the clock right now, I'd hire myself a coach like Jerry. I'd hire myself a coach, somebody who could help push me to learn what took me 4 years to learn in a short amount of time. First coach I ever hired, which wasn't until 2017, I paid $10,000 for a coach. That was so hard. And by the way, I didn't pay. It was a 0% interest credit card that I got. And the very first offer I put in, I brought it to my coach. He helped me go through the construction contract. He cut a bunch of things. This guy's in Michigan. He's not even from Omaha. And he helped me save $15,000 on a construction bid, which I then used on that. So was the $10,000 investment worth it? It most certainly was. And now you can buy coaching for whatever. So this is very worth your time. What's that to do with creative financing? I'll get to it. I'm just saying we're doing the right things right now. Creative finance is the first thing I learned. And if you take anything away from me today, it's the phrase underneath the title there. It's either my price and your terms, or it's your price and my terms. This is a free market. So if you're going to go to somebody and say, "Look, I get it. You want to sell this to me for $200,000. I can't make it work. So if you're going to do it for $200,000, here's what I'd like to do. How about I'll buy it from you for $160,000 right now, or sell it to me for $200,000, and how about you give me a $40,000 seller carry note? Why don't you give me a loan? If you think it's worth $200,000, which you know it's not, if you think it's worth $200,000, give me a $40,000 loan, stand behind what you're telling me, and I'll pay you back in 6 years." That, your price, my terms, my price, your terms, that mindset is something I still use today. And the story about Jerry is the first deal I got into, multifamily, I still didn't have the money to get into. It was a 20 unit. We bought it for around $800K. Just work with me on the figures. I didn't have that money. The down payment on that's a little over $150,000. What did I do? I went to a family member. And I said, "Can I borrow $150,000 at 10%? Now, I'm not saying that any of us have that family member. In fact, I didn't have that family member either. I had to marry into that family member. But what happened? A year later, that $800,000 property was worth around $1.4 million. Here's how else it was creative. At that time, I brought all the capital. Jerry and Mike, I trusted them. They had done everything. Their buy-in to the partnership, 50-50, was they would do all the construction, all the property management, and they would trim so many expenses possible that they would earn their 50%. And at the refi, it worked. How is that creative? That is creative in a million ways. How much money did I use? $0 out of my own pocket. I paid my family member. They made 10%. In fact, I tried paying my family member back. He said, "Holy cow, let's just do it for another year if you're going to give me 10%. That works great." How did Jerry and Mike get into it? They didn't bring the money. They got creative. They provided the service. So neither of us brought a dollar of our own. We were just creative with how we approached it. And we still do that to this day. And I'll go over some of this in the slides. Here's some of the ways creative financing can help you. And I will go into a little more detail. But it can happen if you have bad credit. It can happen if you don't have any money. It can happen if you have something to offer. The thing is, all of us have something to offer. And you have to keep that in mind when you're trying to form partnerships that we'll go and do later. And you keep that in mind when you're trying to buy an asset. The ideal scenarios here are listed, and I'm going to do my best not to read through the bullet points because that's my biggest pet peeve is someone gets to read bullet points. So you can glance at it. I'd rather have you listen to me, but it's important you see some of this stuff. Guys, we're doing this still. You heard Ted say we have over 3,300 units. I'm still buying properties on seller financing. We're about to close a deal. It's not closed yet, so I will not tell you where it is. But we're about to close a deal where not only are we getting a very large seller carry, but we don't even pay on that note to the seller for an entire year. Why? We have a motivated seller. We have a distressed property needing some rehab. And actually, physically, it's not distressed. It's more operationally distressed. There's breakups in the partnerships. They're struggling with what they're doing, and they just want out. And so as part of that, I structured, give me some money up front, and we'll get you out of the deal in a couple of years. That is the way we're still buying deals to this day. Now, also don't get me wrong, we also bought 120 units in Rapid City, and I had to go out and I had to raise $10 million. So we're still buying things the traditional way, but you can be very creative whether it's your first day or where you've been in it for 10 years. And I guess I've been in it now for 12 years, and I'm still using it. It's worth using, and it'll help anybody in this game either get into it or just find more assets. I'm not getting into real estate anymore. I've been in it for 12 years. I'm still using this. Use other people's money. And that's another phrase. I'm going off script, so you're going to have to deal with it. Other people's money. I love that phrase, but it gets this weird connotation. Like, oh, okay, Chris, that's cute. You're going to go use other people's money. And if you go to a bank, is that your money? That's other people's money. And by the way, and I've learned this because I have a lending company with some of the guys in this room, they're your partner. The bank's a part of this deal with you. They're going to give you a bunch of money and say, pay me an interest rate. Well, that's other people's money. So what's the difference? I can tell you this much. I'd rather pay my family member 10% than the bank 7 or 8 or wherever the hell the rates are going these days. I'd rather pay my family member, but either way, other people's money is going to help you get into these deals. Speaking of other people's money, I got a case study here. This is a commercial building, extremely large. It's been vacant for a year. When I say vacant, I mean about 10% occupied. And they can't get their price. So what did we negotiate? I want cash back at closing. So why don't you give me $600,000 cash back at closing? That's not even a note. That's saying, I'll buy what you want, but give me $600,000 at closing. What does that do? Well, now I have to bring $600,000 less when I go to buy that. That's one way to be creative. It's not illegal. It's on the closing statement. The bank knows about it. But it's a way we got to chop off $600,000 of buying that asset. So instead of having to go out and get 1.8 million, we want to get 1.2 million. These are creative ways that you can make and give yourself a better chance to raise money and or close these deals. And what Ted spoke about earlier is I like to give at least 2 offers every time I give an offer on a property. There's a joke here. Stephen Ward's in the crowd here. At least he was. Where's he at? Stephen? Okay, he bounced out. Well, here was his chance to shine. I make a joke with him because I've closed 3 or 4 deals now where he's brought us deals. And when I say us, that's Leavenwealth, that's Colin Me's company here. We've closed 3 or 4 deals and we've used seller carries on every single one. And so I joke with him. I say, Stephen, this isn't always needed, but I'm going to throw it out there. And if they take it, they take it. So I'll come in and I'll say, if you're selling something to me for $100,000 and I can't make it work, up front, I will send my pro forma, which is the document that is projecting what this is going to be worth. I'll provide that pro forma to the seller. And I'll say, I can't get to your $100,000. Here it is. Tell me where I'm wrong. And you'd be surprised how many times you hear, we're hoping you can get there if you owned it for 4 years. They have no problem admitting if you're a seller, you want to max out. But if you give them 2 offers, in their head what they're thinking, instead of, do I like the price, do I not like the price? Now they're making a decision, which option should I take? It's less about, the fixation on this price, and it's more about, oh wow, a couple options. I like this one, I have more to think about. That has always helped us. And so a lot of times I'll come in, and if the property's worth $100,000, or they're asking $100,000, but I think it's worth $75,000, I'll say, I'll pay you $75,000 now, or I'll buy it for $100,000. Give me a $25,000 seller carry, I'll pay it back in 5 years, interest-only payments. And that gives me time to improve the property. It also makes it so that I have to bring $0 to the table. We still do it to this day. And it's something you should keep in mind because people become fixated on, I can't afford this. I don't have the money for this. I don't have the family members for this. Sometimes you don't need a family member. You don't need anything. You need a seller who says, I want out so bad. Here's $25K and pay me in 5 years. Oh, and by the way, they got to spread out their capital gains that way. They got monthly income on the interest I'm paying them. So they're benefiting as well. Keeping that in mind, creative financing will save your life because we still use it to this day. A lot of those ideal scenarios are things to remember when you're thinking about creative financing. Okay, so let's go over some of these things. I've been saying seller financing a lot. Full seller carry versus partial seller carry. So what I was giving you examples of is a partial seller carry, right? They're going to sell it to me for $100K and they're going to carry $25K of that. That is way more common because that's easier for some to understand. But the reason it's even more common is that the mecca of all seller carries is if you can find a seller to do a full seller carry, which means that mom or pop owner has owned this for 30 years. It's completely paid off. They're 70 years old. They want to get out of the game, and they don't know what they're going to do next. And I say, how about this? Rates are at 7% at the bank. I don't like that. Seller, I'll pay you. You be my bank. I'll pay you. I'll buy it for $100K. You give me a note at 5%, which is approximately 2% better than you can get at a local bank right now. And that person now gets continued income over 5 or 10 years. And then I got to bring less to the table. So there's full seller carry when the only person involved is the seller, and that usually only takes place if they've owned the property and there's no bank note. Or much more common is the partial seller carry. If there's any equity, let's say they have $500,000 in equity, and maybe they want to put $300 in their pocket and they'll lend you $200. They're still going to get $200,000 in the future. They're just going to make 5% off you every year for 5 years. And that's one way that we've used the seller carry route. The benefits are simple. Sometimes there's no bank or there's a bank involved and I have to go out and I have to raise a lot less money, which is huge. Not bringing money to the table is very important. If you can think about that mom and pop who says, I put all my life into this and I don't know what I'm going to do next. Well, knowing they have that residual income coming in from that note you provided to them, that's a good way to incentivize a seller. Here's another example. Purchasing a property with $500,000 or $100,000 seller carry. I've kind of already gone over this. This is a real world example. I don't have a picture of it. But this allowed me to get into the deal for no money. We bought a $500,000 property. The bank gave me a $400,000 note. The seller gave me a $100,000 note. I own a property for $500,000 for no money down. Again, that is not the primary way I buy things. I would every single time. It's just not always the case, but it's an opportunity, and it's certainly a great way to get started, or do it again when you're 12 years into what you're doing. Okay, so additional ways to be creative. I'm throwing this in the creative block because many people think they have to do all this on their own. And so they say, oh my gosh, I got to go out and raise money. I got to go out and I swing the hammer. I got to go out and manage my product. To be creative, you can use a lot of these things. I just gave you an example about Jerry, Mike Schlickburn, and I. Strategic partnerships. I brought the dough. They brought the service. We all got into the deal. That's very creative. They got it creative by getting in. I got creative by borrowing money. That's a way you can partner up with people and be creative about how you're taking deals down. HELOCs. Not many people are familiar with these. Most of you are familiar with these because you know that you have an aunt or an uncle somewhere, or you yourself took out a second position HELOC and you wanted to update your kitchen. Well, you don't have to update anything. That loan is from the bank because you have so much equity in your home. Some people forget they have all that equity still in their home. Take out that HELOC and go out and buy a property. And if you're going to make more on that property than the cost of that HELOC, it's certainly worth your time and a way to get in there. The third way to raise money and or be creative about how you buy very large assets is syndications or crowdfunding. So I'll get into that a little bit later, but it's a legal term. Andy Corey was right. I do not practice as my own attorney for all these things. We hire 3 different attorneys. I have an SEC attorney, we have a contracts attorney, and we have another attorney that helps us with our lending business. So we hire those things out. But here's an example of syndications. This is very recent. We closed on a great opportunity for us, 126 townhomes. It was a plethora of reasons why it worked out. First off, they were 20% below market rate on their rents. Why? I don't blame them. Sometimes it's through bad operations. Here's why they were 20% less. They didn't have a bank note. And they've owned it for 25 years. And I can tell you this much, if I've owned something for 25 years and I have no bank note, I may not be trying to push rent every single month because every dollar is cash flow. So we went to the seller and we said, hey, we'd like to buy this. It's about a $4 million raise. And I'm appreciative to be up here speaking to you guys, but I can tell you I don't have $4 million under my mattress right now. And so what did I do? I had to go out, me and the team had to go out and raise money. So we raised money from other investors who are now owners of that deal. And don't get it confused with a REIT. People confuse this with REITs all the time. Every person I've ever talked to, oh, it's like a REIT. No, it's not. A REIT, generally speaking, is you're investing into a REIT. You're basically giving your money to a company, kind of like the stock market. Disclaimer, everything I say today, go ahead and double check with your attorney if you want. But it's kind of like the stock market. You're giving your money to a company. They're using that money, they're going out and they're making a bunch of money, and they're going to promise you some dividends of 5% or so. And it's relatively safe because the REITs are huge, and so you're leveraged and you have properties everywhere, but you're not an owner. You don't get all the write-offs. You don't get all the upside. That's a REIT, and I'm not going to go into that because we don't do that. Syndications are you, and you. Give me $100,000. Let's go buy this thing. And if you were to look at the operating agreement, the owners are you, and me. We all own it. So you all get the write-offs, you all get the upside, you all get everything. And that's what really helped us grow. And when I made that transition from single family to multifamily, I understood the process. Don't get me wrong, I'm still learning today, but I understood the process, but I didn't have all of that money laying around. So I had to go out and raise money. Was it easier for me 4 years in? Yes, because I had some examples of what I had done thus far. For whatever reason, having a couple letters at the end of my name from my degrees helped, even though it had nothing to do with real estate. But regardless, I had to go out there and I had to raise money. We just closed this deal. The average is about $285,000 per investor that we brought in, a bunch of legal structures, and I'll go into a little bit later syndications, but this is creative. Because many of you will think, oh, I don't have $4 million. Well, of course you don't. Other people have money. Other people want to diversify what they're doing. Real estate's, it's the second most common way that people want to invest. Everyone knows about the stock market. Everyone tries to get in their 401k with their companies, and that's fine. But if you want to diversify, which you should, you get into real estate. And you have a lot of people who want to say, I don't want 1 a.m. phone calls. I don't know where to find deals. Holy cow, you already have a system built. Here's my money. And as long as I'm protected legally, that's what you should do. And that's what syndications are. And we'll go through it a tad bit more in the future. Here is a not shameless plug for hard money. We do have a hard money company. I don't like to say hard money, I like to say private lending. But I feel 0% bad about this company or the rates that are charged. First off, why? They're market rates. So call around. They're the same everywhere. But not only that, I have used this company. I own the company, and I have borrowed money from the company at 18%. And some of you are like, what idiot would borrow money at 18%? Well, you're only an idiot if you don't have a plan. If the plan is buy a strip mall in South O for $450,000, I called the seller. I didn't do it. It was one of my team members, but it makes the story better if I'm doing it. They called the seller, and they said, hey, you want $520? I can't do it. But Chris and his team over here, they'll pay you $450. They'll close on Friday. That is very powerful. The purpose of private lending, whether it's from your uncle or your father or a group like Liquid Lending Solutions, which I am part owner of, that is the purpose of that, is to help you close quickly. The speed of money is what matters. So the seller said, holy shit, Friday? Let's do it. Bought it for $450. And 45 days later, we sold it for $545,000. So sure, I paid 18% for 45 days, but that's a blip on the radar. That's nothing. That's how you use this money. We have borrowers in this room. They're buying homes for $60,000. They're borrowing the loan from us, all $60,000. They're closing in a week. Sometimes with our experienced investors, they've done a few deals with us, we'll lend them 100% of the rehab loan. Now they're all in at $80K with zero money out of their pocket, and as long as they have a plan, they flip that house in 3 months, 4 months. The average loan for this is 4 months. 4 months is our average loan. So no, nobody's doing 30-year mortgages at 18%. That's dumb. But if you have a plan, you need to do this. And whether it's a hard money company, private money, or whether it's your uncle or your aunt or your coworker, use other people's money if you can, as long as you have a plan. And I think it's really going to help you. We still use it to this day. I still borrow from this company and pay myself 18%, which is still a risk for me, but it's how you get money faster. Okay, I am going to try to break this up. Any questions about creative financing? I'll take 2. If anybody has any questions. I'd like to break it up in segments because I have 4 segments and they're unrelated. Any questions about seller financing? Yell it out. I know you got a question.
So I know you have done so many seller financing and all these. Can you give me the example of first seller financing you did?
First seller financing I did? No. I'm sorry because I've seriously done it like 20 or 30 times. So ask a follow-up question. I can't think of the first one.
For anyone who's new to seller financing, we hear about it everywhere. It's a buzzword. So many people are doing it.
Yeah.
But like a case study that we can study, okay, this is how it is done, or this is how someone can get into it, start doing it.
Sure thing. So I did speak about a couple case studies here, but I'll go through what's most important. What's most important is that you can articulate what that offer is to the buyer. And sometimes, and this is not a shot at you real estate agents in the room, but sometimes you need to educate your agent. Because in their heads, they're like, what? What is that? Or they're like, well, how am I going to get paid? And there are certainly ways you can do that. And so the most important thing about seller financing is that you understand and you're ready to articulate that to the seller. Because most sellers aren't understanding of what that's about to be. Understand what you're asking for, how it benefits the seller, and be able to articulate that to both the seller and the agent. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Great, man.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, I'm back. So through the MLS systems and listings, and you talk about motivation, I think you're going to talk about that later, so I might be putting the cart before the horse. But so how do you determine motivation when you're dealing with these conversations? You just call them on the phone, ask them questions, and also it sounds like when you see these listings, it looks like you're making money in the buy, like down 15%, or I guess I'm curious, like what's your negotiation strategies with books? You reading wait till the first person responds?
Oh, check it out, man. My next session is negotiation technique, so I promise I'll go over that.
All right, we're good.
But one of the things, I'd couple it with what I just said. Make sure you understand that what you're offering, and I'd stick to this, give at least 2 offers every time. You'd be really surprised on how many people will grab onto that second offer. Cool? Thanks, man. Okay, negotiation techniques. Uncovering true motivation, building rapport, and active listening. Sure, buzzwords. Andy spoke about buzzwords. These are real things. In fact, a guy on our team, Jason Belt, who works at Beck & Dickinson, he's a great capital raiser. I have never seen somebody build better rapport than him. It is authentic. If you're going to find these great deals, you cannot be cold, and you have to understand the seller's motivations. I give you examples of when it worked, but the reason I found out it would work is because I built that rapport with the seller. Why are you selling this? Well, I'm at the end of my 3-year span. I planned on flipping the property. I want top dollar. That probably isn't my seller. Or I bit off more than I could chew, and I don't have any operations, and this is extremely difficult. Well, now we're talking. Or I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm done, and I just need somebody to take this off my plate. And that happens a lot, and we get a lot of our deals. In fact, the deal I just went over, we just bought a $13 million project. I went over earlier. It's 126 units in Sioux Falls. They said, we're done. We've just been doing it too long. We're ready to get out. Building that rapport, understanding what it is they need is extremely important if you actually want to figure out the best way you can purchase that deal. Anchoring effect. It's easy for people earlier. I spoke about if you only have one offer, then that's all they're concentrating on, right? If you give 2 offers, now they're like, oh, I have options. Same with figures. They're offering $10 million to sell the place. If I underwrite it, look, it says it right here. You need to be able to back it up. You can't be that asshole that just comes in and says, $10 million, I'll give you 2. You got to say, look, you said $10 million, and I respect you. And by the way, if there's an agent in the middle, which sometimes there is, say, I want to let this be known up front. I'm not being disrespectful. You got a job to do, agent. You got to get max dollar for your client, and I respect that game 100%. And by the way, when I hire an agent to sell my stuff, I want them to get me top dollar. So no, all the world of respect. But when I come in at $8 million for a $10 million deal, I'll say, here's how I got here. First off, places in the area are selling for $100K a door. That's what $8 million is right now. By the way, this is a Class C asset, and here's my pro forma. This isn't me just saying, I woke up and I thought 8 sounded good. I'm saying, here's the numbers you gave me. These are your numbers. And here's exactly what the value is. Now, I'm not here to tell you you're wrong. This isn't a battle. You're wrong. But I'm not going to tell you that. I'm just going to say, This is what I have as the value. So if you're trying to max it at 10, I understand, but here's why I'm at 8. So boom, I want 8. Now, of course that may upset some people, and by the way, if you're getting every deal you're offering on, you're doing something wrong, you're overpaying. But if you set it at 8 million, now in their mind is, how can they get you up from there? They're thinking about that 8 million. Now, there are a lot of seasoned people in this room, so I'm not trying to say if you come in at 8 million, all of a sudden you're guaranteed to get 8.5 every single time. I'm not saying that, but if you can justify that figure in the mind for the negotiation, that seller is saying, okay, 8 million, I got to get them up. How can I prove it's higher than 8 million? Okay, here's this. And maybe it does come up to 8.5. But in their mind, they're thinking about that 8 million because you set the anchor. That's really, really, really helpful. Here's another example. So that picture is those are the townhomes we bought. The picture for the green portion, I'm not going to share with you because that also hasn't closed. It will close very soon. They wanted to sell it to us for 7.2. I can't get there. I could not get there on my underwriting. I could not get there. So instead, I got them down to 6.4 because I anchored them at 5.5. Now I backed it up. I got them 6.4, and you guys are like, Chris, that's cool, but you just said it's only worth 5.5. Why would you buy it for 6.4? Well, because I got a $700,000 seller carry, and I don't pay him for an entire year. And when I do start paying him, it's interest only, and it doesn't balloon for 5 years. And my math says it'll be worth way more than that in 5 years, so it's a comfortable position I'm in. They get to spread out their capital gains. They get that monthly payments. Those are ways to be creative, and that all bounced off of me doing a 5.5 anchor. Anchoring effect is huge. All right, I'm going to go over this before we play. Power of silence. This is really hard for me if you can't tell. I used to get paid as an attorney for 10 years. I used to get paid for every 6 minutes I would talk. Now, I promise you, I wouldn't be looking at the clock saying, keep talking, Chris, let's make some money. But being silent's tough, especially if you're in this room, half of you are really motivated as hell. Half of you are here for credits, which I don't blame you. The other half want to kick some ass. So it's really, really tough to be motivated and stay silent. Being silent has helped me so much. And I'm not even talking about real estate. I'm talking about relationships. I'm talking about a chance for me to be quiet, let my wife speak. I see some heads nodding here. Being silent allows you to collect yourself, but even better, it makes that other person start thinking and really engaged in what you're saying. If it's this, no that, no this, no that, they're anchored in their head about their thought. They haven't had time to sit here and think what's going on with this conversation. And just sitting there in silence has been extremely powerful. In fact, I did it just last night. I was getting sold on a business, and they wanted me to pay $75,000. I did pull out the card, is that the best you can do? And then I sat there, which felt like 5 hours, but it was probably closer to 5 seconds. And the answer was, you know what? I didn't say anything, by the way, just sat there. You know what? I can do 60, and I can break your payments up into 12. Just from being quiet, which takes, I was about to say no skill. Actually, it's extremely hard. But you see what I'm saying here. Being quiet is a very good negotiation technique. I want to give you an example here of the silent negotiation approach. Thank you very much. Let's listen in.
Trick from the old days. It's called silent negotiation.
You let her talk first, but then you don't say a word. You just stare at her and wait her out. She'll start talking in circles, doubting herself.
Eventually she'll break down like a Chinese Rolex.
Okay, here's how I see it. Kate is very mature. I mean, you've said that yourself, so you're kind of arguing against yourself here. It's a school-sanctioned event, Adam. I mean, nothing will go wrong. She's going to be surrounded by adults all night. Except in the car. And she's going to be hanging out with Danny's friends. And older kids sneak alcohol into dances. You know what? You're right. She shouldn't go to this thing. It's a bad idea.
So we've reached an agreement.
I guess so, yeah.
Well, thanks for hearing me out.
I like that. Silence really helps. And it's something that's hard, but managing it works. Creative structures in negotiations, win-win. This is not a buzzword, it's sincere. I promise it's sincere. Now don't get me wrong. If that $10 million property is sold to me for $2 million and for some reason that seller's okay with that. I don't know how they won. I'd take it. But if you get relatively educated people, it's going to be really hard to get to where you want to get if people aren't winning, if both sides aren't winning. I know that's a common buzz phrase, but I promise you it matters so much. When I was an attorney for 10 years, I'd mediate full divorces. If one side didn't think they were winning on items A, B, and C, then it was going nowhere. And that's how you have to think when you're negotiating. And you need to highlight that to the seller. Guy, I can't get to your $10 million. I'm only at 8. But here's what I can do. Give me a $2 million seller carry, and I can give you interest-only payments for 5 years, 10 years, whatever. But you're winning because you're getting the price that you want. You're winning because you're out of those operational headaches. You're winning because for 5 years, I'm going to give you 5% payments on $2 million. That's $100,000 a year. Seller, I know you don't like operations. What if you just went to the beach for 5 years and you made $100,000 a year? That's a win for them as well. It's a win for me because now I just brought $0 to a $10 million purchase. Of course, the numbers need to work out, but these are ways win-wins actually work for everybody. Did I overpay? Maybe. Did it help me get in there and it help actually make a long-term investment better for both sides? No doubt. The conditional close technique. If I do this, would you do this? So that's what I gave as an example earlier when I shamelessly plugged liquid lending. I said, seller, you want $540,000? If I can close by Friday, would you give it to me for $450,000? Immediately, the answer was yes. And that's really important. Now, did I use other people's money? Yes. Did I use creative financing? Yes. But what I'm doing is I'm laying out something and saying, I know they're going to really latch on to that final thing. So if I can do this, are you liking this? And that's really, really important. That's a way to negotiate that contract. Believe it or not, this non-cash inducement situation, we've done this as well. So we have a deal right now where I'm saying, look, I'll come to your price if you fix the roof. Fix it. Now, is that a retrade? I don't know, but after our negotiations or due diligence, we found out there's way more here that's needed. So we can back out of the contract, or you can go out and get the roof done yourself. That's one way they win. They're getting their price. Do they have to spend a little bit of money? Yes, but do they now know that most buyers are going to say this roof is jacked up, I'm not buying the place? So these are things that if you take care of this, I'll close on the property. Those are things you can think about when you're negotiating the asset. Overcoming the objections. So financial contingencies, proof of funds. This has become an issue because banks have been a lot more locked down recently. That's timeline concerns. And this is where you have to you kind of mold these two things together here. So if they're worried about a financial contingency, you can say, look, I can't control the appraisal, but I can tell you, here is a letter from my bank saying that if it gets to where you say it's supposed to be worth, I qualify as a buyer. So in their head, they're saying, who's this guy saying he's going to buy this from us, but he needs a financing contingency? Well, first off, the financing contingency isn't for me. I'm comfortable. I'm going to qualify. And by the way, seller, here's my note from the bank. Call him. His name's Lewis. Call him right now. I'm ready to go. All I'm saying is I'm ready to roll, but what I won't do is go hard on my earnest deposit to find out that $10 million deal you're trying to sell me is actually only worth $7 million because I already told you it's worth 8. I know it's worth 8. So the last thing I want to do is find out that it's only worth 7 and I'm buying it for 10. So I know that that's not as used anymore. People frown upon financial contingencies. In fact, this is not 2021 or 22 anymore. Financial contingencies should be a part of some of your offers, especially if you're having a hairy deal. That's my opinion. It protects you. Another real world example right here. So we don't have a before and after, but this is an updated unit of ours. We bought a 16 unit property for $0 down. We got a seller carry from the seller. We got a bank. I owned a 16 unit with my partners for 0 money down. That's an example. Okay, we only buy value add opportunities. Now value add takes on a number of different definitions, and I hope you understand that after we go through this, but value add can come from, they're charging $700 in rent, but it should be $900. Boom, there's your value add. Through that process, you have to rehab the unit. So there's your value add. All the units were built in 1975. They still look like 1975, and they're renting at $700. Well, I know I could get in there and I could probably bump it up to $795, but if I rehab that unit, it's now worth $1,100 a door. That's huge for value add. That's all we buy. And why do we buy value add? Because you need that to mitigate your risk. If you buy a property, which you're going to see a lot of in the next year and a half, if you buy a property and say real estate's the greatest thing ever, which by the way, I still stand by it is, go ahead and look it up, ChatGPT it, talk to whoever you want to. If you have a good financial advisor who also invests in real estate, go ahead and ask him. He will tell you real estate's phenomenal, but you have to have patience. The problem with that is if you buy an asset at the top of the market and you can't add any value, you are really beholden to what happens in the market. So if you buy that $100,000 unit and you don't have to do anything to it, you don't have to touch it, and you're just like, I just know that in 5 years real estate will be worth more, you're taking a big risk, especially when the largest increase in the interest rates in the history of the United States takes place, like it did over the last 3 years. The value of your property may have just gone down. So what builds in this mitigated risk is to make sure you have value to add. So even if the value comes down, when you bought that $8 million property, let's say the interest rate stayed the same and you fixed it all up, it's worth $10 million. And then interest rates skyrocket, which means cap rates skyrocket, which means the value goes down. Well, now your value goes down to $9 million, but you bought it for $8 million. You had that mitigated risk because you're actually adding value. I hope that resonates. There's a number of ways to do this. You can read all of them here. One example I like to give is adding laundry. So look at 200 units. There's a shared laundry area, right? And people show up, and in my opinion, whether it's Jets or CoinMock or whoever terrible third party you use, it's more of an amenity to say, hey, there's laundry on site. I would not think that you're going to retire from the coins in those machines, especially when Jets doesn't answer your phone call for 4 weeks. But I can tell you that it's an amenity and it's something that's just offered to the tenants. What if you have a decent enough complex where you can add laundry in every unit? Okay, so let's take a 200 unit complex. You spend $150,000 adding laundry, units, electrical, everything. And because of that, where they're moving in, they don't have to lug their laundry across the courtyard in the snow and throw their coins in half the machines that work with CoinMock. And they don't have to do any of that. It's already inside their business. And all you're doing is you're charging another $50 a month. Well, I can tell you that's about what people would spend on laundry if they had to lug their stuff across the courtyard. But they're paying another $50 in rent. For 200 units, that's $10,000 a month. For a year, that's $120,000 of income you just made. So sure, you spent $150K, but in 1 year, you made 120 of that back. And while that means you made your money back in 1.25 years, which is freaking phenomenal, what's hidden in that is that because your property has gone up $120,000 in NOI, net operating income, your property is worth $2 million more at a 6 cap. What does that mean? People are like, well, I spent this, so what do I get back quickly? That's great, don't get me wrong. You spent $150,000 and now you're getting $120 a year. So by the end of the year and a half, you've already made your money back. But your property's worth $2 million more on the market because it's pulling in $120 extra a month. The way you value multifamily is different than single family, okay? You can have a 3-bed, 2-bath on the same street next to each other. And that 3-bed, 2-bath, relatively same condition, is gonna sell at the same price as next door. You're running comps all day. In multifamily, you can have 2 20-unit complexes next door to each other, and they could sell for millions of dollars of difference because the way they're valued is a business. You could look at a multifamily as a McDonald's. It's going to run off of one figure. What is the net operating income? What is income minus expenses? You take that, divide it by the cap rate, there's your value. You can't do that with single-family homes. Why is that awesome for us? Because we control the value. We can't control interest rates, but we control the value. We can do better on our systems to get more in income. We can do better on our systems to get less in expenses. That increases the value. And that's huge, and that's why value add is so important. Here's some examples of physical improvements. It's very obvious. You're going to go in there, you're going to update all the units. Sometimes you update partially, new flooring. Don't make it look like 1975, make it look like 2025. That's understandable. It allows you to pay more. I don't have to go through most of those things on the left because you understand that. Here's a before and after picture of a common area. Nothing wrong with the one on the left. It just looks like my grandma lives there. The one on the right, depending upon your color aesthetics and whether you think that's cool or not, it certainly is more hip than the one on the left. What does that do? It invites something in. It's a common area, but when people walk in, the first thing they see is the common area, like, oh, I kind of like this place. That's one way to physically improve the asset. Operational enhancements. Here's an example. We bought 121 units in Rapid City, brand new. Chris, how the hell are you going to value out a brand new complex? Well, here's what happened. The builder had a 3-year plan, like all flippers. Nothing against flippers. Plenty of the people in this room have made money on flipping. But what happened at the end of 3 years? Interest rates increased. Values of properties went down. And now the GC, the developer, who thought he was going to have a great 3-year exit, is holding an asset that if he sold today, he would actually break even on 3 years. So what did he do? He filled all the units at 20 or 30% less than market rate, just to fill the damn place. He's not a property manager. He's not even an owner. So we bought it, and he immediately can just jack the rates up 30% without touching the units. No new floors, no new cabinets, because everything's brand new. There's just operational enhancements we can have. There's lists of different operational enhancements here, but you can go through technology fees you can charge. You can do insurance, you can make some money. This RUBS thing is huge. Most of the deals we're buying, the sellers pay at least half the utilities for the tenants. And this isn't a shot at anybody. I just admitted to you at 30 years old I lived in my mom's basement, so my pride's gone. But I can tell you this. I can tell you that you shouldn't be paying for adults' utilities. I don't feel bad saying that. And that's not anything bad on me. I pay my own utilities. We should all pay utilities. A lot of mom and pop owners are like, oh, there's only one meter. This is hard to figure out. I'm just going to pay it for them. Well, you can make a lot of money just simply billing back the tenants for their utilities. That's one way to make money. Is that an asshole move? I don't know. Most people don't have free utilities. You're just trying to make sure the place runs better. And by the way, if you lose a couple tenants, there's a high possibility you have a higher caliber tenant who's willing to pay their own water bill. They also don't let the water run forever. They also don't let the heat run forever, which often happens if they don't have to pay it. So why would they even care? Repositioning. So I actually am glad I went on my diatribe. I've gone through most of this. Common area conversions. We did this in a property in Sioux Falls. Bought 63 units. I was so happy with how this project's going. And a partner of ours was like, what are these little nook and cranny study areas? I've never walked through an apartment and seen someone just like studying in this like little nook and cranny. We turned it into 2 studios. So $50,000 for a studio. Sounds like a lot of money, I guess. For 2, sorry, $25K a piece. But that's what they leased at, so $1,590 total. We spent $50,000. We got $790 a piece, $1,590 total. That's $19,000 in income. Not only is that a 38% return on my investment, but back to the cap rate. Spending $50,000 made me $19,000 more a month, and it raised the value of the property $318,000. No brainer. Exit strategies. I could dig deep into this, but I know that I don't have time. These are the things you need to remember. NOI. We're here for 5 to 25 units. It doesn't matter. Anything over 5 is multifamily. Anything over 5 units is going to be valued at your NOI. It is income minus expenses. That is the most important thing to remember. If you can increase your NOI, you will increase the value of your asset, whether it's a multifamily or whether it's a McDonald's. If it's making more money as a business, and that's how it's looked at, it'll increase the value. This is not a single family home. It's much different. Internal rate of return. Good luck explaining that without an Excel spreadsheet. What that really means is, what's the time value of my money? So an IRR would be, I invested $100,000 in this deal, I made $10,000 a year for 5 years. Boom, I made $50,000. That's easy to calculate because I made $10,000 a year, so you could say that your return is 10% and your IRR is 10%, but usually you don't have that clean of numbers. IRR is what everyone should care about. Both that and equity multiple are certainly misleading. Equity multiple is how much in cash distributions did you get, that includes a sale, divided by how much you invested. Well, that's great. I put in $100,000, I got $300,000 back. That's a 3x multiple. Well, not if you did it in 20 years. That's not very good. And what that 20 years thing is affected by? The IRR. The IRR would say, well, sure, but you made $200,000 over 20 years. That's way less of an IRR. What is that? Rain Man, Colin in the back. What is that? 37. There it is. Important to keep track. Cash on cash, that's what everybody thinks about, right? I put in $100,000, I get $7,000 back a year. My cash on cash is 7%. That's how you entice an investor for sure. Legal partnerships, great. I end on the most exciting, boring thing. This is really important because I keep telling you about other people's money. This is extremely important. I am not your attorney, so there's your disclaimer. But I'm telling you, this is probably the most important thing, especially if you've been doing this the last couple of years, because real estate's an up and down market like anything else. And so you're going to have 90% of people happy, but 10% is going to have some questions. If you're legally structured correctly, you're fine. When you're raising money from people, the question to ask yourself is the person I'm raising from, are they going to be active or passive? If I go to Jim over here and he gives me $100K, is he going to help me swing some hammers? Is he going to help lease? Is he going to help negotiate some stuff? Or is he just going to give me $100K and say, I want some money back? Either way, it's fine. But if he's passive, I want you to remember that rule. If you have anybody passive, I don't care about, now, you can take risks all you want to, but I'm telling you legally, if you're using people's money and they're not doing anything, they are passive. And what does that mean? You are selling securities. And what does that mean? You need to abide by the SEC, which is a very serious thing. Now, it's not scary because it shouldn't be a surprise to an SEC attorney. They draft you a document called a private placement memorandum, a PPM. It goes through 70 pages of, this is our relationship. You give me money, I make decisions, you trust me, and we'll move on to the next thing. And that, as long as that's signed and understood by everybody, you're safe. But if you raise $100,000 from that person and you haven't talked to them in 3 years and something goes wrong, they could sue you, because it doesn't take anything to sue. It doesn't mean you're right when you sue. It's just that you found an attorney who's probably chasing ambulances and he sues you. And what happens? Do you have that PPM and subscription agreement signed? Did you legally cover yourself? If you did, tough luck, guy. And this has never happened to us, knock on wood, yeah, whatever. I'm just saying, structure it. And make sure that the partners understand right up front. Just make sure, look, are you doing a joint venture where me and some buddies are going to go out and be all active, or are you going to raise money and be passive? If you're going to be a passive, get a good SEC attorney. Being passive, I'll try to get through this as quickly as possible. If you're doing the syndication, the general partners are the active people, the limited partners are the passive people. The general partners who you're trusting to invest your money and carry out the entire business plan, that's us. That's us at Leavenwealth or whoever you trust to do it. If you're limited, nothing wrong with that, you just don't make the day-to-day decisions. Why? Because you have a job. You have another job. You're just investing with us, and that's fine. You're a limited partner. You own the real estate with us. You're just passive. That's fine. Those are some techniques, and you should make sure they understand that. What we do to incentivize people is to say, look, we'll give you a 7% preferred return too. So if you give us $100,000, the first 7% of the profits, they go to you. So hypothetically, if we buy a property and it makes 7% every single year and we sell it at year 10 and it makes another 7%, that's a decent investment for the person. But I just worked for free for 10 years because actually me as the general partner, I don't start making money until it goes over 7%. And as a general partner, I start putting these limits and say, look, I'll give you the first 7%, but after that, let's start splitting things 70-30. That's my reward for making your thing perform better than 7%. They feel comfortable that they're going to have an investment that's going to perform at least 7%, at least if there's profit, they'll get it. But on top of that, they know that I am incentivized so much to make it perform better than 7%, because that's when I start making money. And that's how we structure these deals. Don't get me wrong, I'd love it if somebody gave us $100,000 and we split everything 50-50 on the first penny. That'd be great. But in order to really protect the investor, these are the kind of things we like to do, is give them a preferred return. I went over the legal documentation. That's just really important. Now, he held up 10 minutes ago. So is it still 10 minutes? All right. Glad I went over all this stuff. 506Bs, 506Cs. You don't have to memorize that stuff, but there's a difference. When it's a 506B, that's the SEC code, okay? What that means is you're going to have a bunch of passive investors. You can go out there and you can raise a bunch of money, but you can only go to your friends and family. There must be a pre-existing relationship. And that doesn't mean you found the deal, you put it under contract, but you haven't closed yet, and then you went out and found some people you didn't know. Before you contemplated buying that asset, which would be the offer or under contract, you had a pre-existing relationship with that person. Why does that matter? Because they only want you to go friends. This is actually a protection for the investor. They don't want you to market if it's a 506B. You're only allowed to go to people you know, and that protects them because now they can invest and not be an accredited investor. An accredited investor, the guidelines just changed, but your net worth's over $1 million, not including your personal home, or you make over $200,000 or $300,000, depending upon if you're married. There's classifications for what an accredited investor is, but if you do a 506B, you could raise money from somebody who's worth nothing. It's odd how they would give you money, but you see what I'm saying. They don't have to be accredited, which is how we started. First many deals, we did 506Bs because I couldn't go market myself to the world because they were like, what's your experience? And I said, I have 4 single-family homes and I used to be an attorney, but I need to go to my friends and family first. That's what a 506B is. You're not allowed to market. You're not allowed to market. A 506C, My face could be on the billboard. If you drive by there, invest with us. I don't care. I've never met you before. Invest with us. It allows you to market. That's what a 506c is. That's great. You can market, right? You're going to need to market. But the downfall of 506cs are that they have to be an accredited investor. They have to meet a certain financial threshold. Those are two things to keep in mind because that's very important. Deal we just closed 2 months ago, 180 units right here in town. Average investment, $125,000. It was a 506c. We had about 40 partners. Everyone invested in with us. The average is $125,000. The disclosure is 85 pages long. If someone's going to give you $125,000, they better be able to read 70 pages, or they can kick it to their attorney. But you're protected because you're following the SEC rules. 2 slides left, guys and ladies. These are different areas that money comes from, right? So there's common equity. I've been talking to you about this. The guy just giving you 50. The guy giving you 100. That's the equity. Very understood. Here's my money in the deal. Preferred equity is more expensive. That's someone who says, I'll give you some money, but I want higher returns. But in return for that, once it hits a certain threshold, it's all yours. And their goal is to exit. So for example, you buy that $8 million property. You raise $2 million from somebody with preferred equity, and then in 3 years, you refinance it and you pay them off. And as long as they hit 8 to 14%, they're gone. They earned 18 to 14%, they're gone. Now you own it yourself. It's expensive, know what you're doing, but it's certainly a way to make sure you own more of the pie. We've only used preferred equity once, and I'm not a big fan of it because it's almost like having another boss, and that's one reason I got out of the mainstream is I don't like bosses. But with preferred equity, you can move quickly as long as it's going to perform. Now, what we do is we keep the common equity in. So when we refinance, look, if I could be selfish and all my investors said, hey, I just want it for 3 years, and when you refinance, give me money back, and you can own it all yourself, of course I would love to do that. But what builds rapport and what builds long-term wealth building is with our investors, we keep them all in. So even that $100,000 investor, when we refinance and we give them their $100,000 back, we still own the property. They own the property for $0. And when that's happened with us 63 times now, maybe 65 now, guess what they say as soon as you give their money back? When's the next one? When's the next one? I mean, I own this complex with you and I've had no money in it. Or I own this complex with you and you gave me 65% back and I'm still getting cash flow. Let's go on to the next one. And that's really enticing. Mezzanine debt is just like second debt. It's like getting a second loan. So you have the bank and then you have mezzanine debt, then you have the common equity. Senior debt. So you come in, the bank gives you 80% loan, maybe the mezzanine debt will give you the other 10%, and now the last 10% you raise from common equity. And that's usually how the stack works if you're going to use all those. Us primarily, we just simply use senior debt and common equity. Partnerships, it's dating. There's nothing wrong with having partners for a little bit, changing partners, there's nothing wrong with that. I often call Colin my work wife, even though he calls me the wife. And that's not a derogatory thing, ladies. I'm just saying he likes to call me the wife because he has this very strong personality, so I kind of... Now, we've stayed together, which is great. I've had many partners who I still consider friends to this day, who I still own things with. We just chose to do different paths. Make sure you actually spell out what everybody's job is. When you're getting married, you're going through what's their background in life. Maybe if you're religious, what's your religious thoughts? Where are you from? Do you want to have kids? These are things you're learning about a prospective spouse or somebody you're just trying to date. Same damn thing with partnerships. If I could rewind it, I wish I would ask more questions. Now, I'm super happy for all the mistakes that I've made because you learn. But back to what I said earlier, if you can pay a coach or come to events like this and learn things, you can learn a lot quicker and not make the same mistakes that we have. But make sure you understand that you're defining these different roles. You're doing services, I'm raising money. You have the property management company, and I have the money. I will continue to deal with insurance and banks and whatnot, but make sure it's spelled out because you would never want a misunderstanding. Oh, I thought you were doing this. I thought you were doing this. When Colin and I first got started, we found out we were doing all the same things over and over again. So the banker was like, yeah, I know, I just got the phone with Colin, or, like we kept doing the same thing. So we just defined what we're doing and boom, there was your differences. Or I've been in some partnerships where I did everything and that person or people are no longer my partners. Where did I mess up? We didn't have that conversation. We didn't say, you're doing this, I'm doing this. Some people you'd think they wouldn't just sit there and do nothing, but you've been on a date that you chose never to date that person again, and so things happen. It's no big deal. You should look at these partnerships as if you're dating. Cool, man. Last slide. This is the stuff I went through: expanding your financial toolkit, creative financing, negotiation psychology, value-add fundamentals, and legal structures. Super sexy building we have here in town here. I'm excited to show that off when it's done. So, I have a few minutes left, so sorry. Please don't go to the mic. please do not go to the microphone. Raise your hand if you have a question. Guy.
Can you get on the mic, please, up there?
I was trying to get more questions in.
All right, I'm going to apologize to the realtors, but I would still run into realtors that don't know what hard money is just on a single family purchase. When looking at a 10 to 20 unit property and I want to submit a couple offers, one with owner financing involved, how do you cut through the BS to get to the property owner so that you can actually negotiate?
Look, this is not a shot at realtors, I promise you. But some of them need to get out of the way. And it's not an agent problem. Some HVAC people need to get the F out of the way. Some people just don't know what the hell they're doing. A good agent, I would start with, which I've had to do to this day, with newer agents, not new to the game, but new in our relationship. I first make sure I can explain to them where I'm coming from. And this is not bad. They have a family or themselves, and they're worried about that commission is what they're worried about. And so you got to explain to them, look, I'll buy this. I have money. Don't worry about where it's from. Here's a letter from Liquid Lending Solutions or wherever the heck you're getting your money. I have the money, and guess what's built into that money? Your commission. So I'd like to work with you, agent, on making sure the seller knows what the heck they're doing when I offer this. And agent, my filter, I want to make sure you know that you're going to be taken care of. If your job's to take care of them, then you need to understand what I'm giving you. And I've had that difficult conversation, but sometimes it works, and sometimes you have agents who just don't get out of the way. So my suggestion would be to first educate the agent, and then oftentimes what I've asked, and a good agent will allow this unless they're gatekeeping, and I promise you my number one thing, I'll say, can we all talk? Us three, in person, on the phone. I'll let you prep them, say whatever you want, but in case they have some follow-up questions, I'd love to be a part of it, because if the follow-up questions have to go through you, you're either answering the wrong thing, so those are the things I would suggest, is to open the lines of communication.
Thanks.
Yeah, man. Yeah. He said, as the devil is in the details, what is the way you structure your creative financing? Basically what you said? Okay. Attorneys, 100%. Everyone's like, I don't want to spend money for an attorney. I'm telling you, the $2,000 you spent on the attorney that saved you $200,000 in legal fees in the future because you messed everything up is worth every penny. And that's not me selling anything. I will not be your attorney. I don't make any money off of attorney anymore. I still hire 3 attorneys in my life, and it's worth every penny because they make sure it's right. So when it comes to creative financing, I want to make sure, first off, that my offer was understood. Hey, guy, you know you're giving me this money for interest only for this long. Are we on the same page? Cool. And then the contract has to say it. Nothing against agents. I keep saying that. There's nothing. We're successful because of agents, so I should backtrack. I'm here where I am because agents have now learned to trust us, and they bring us off-market deals all the time. But what's important is that oftentimes I will use my attorney's purchase agreement rather than the agent. I'm not saying that's gold. Yes, it does go a little slower, but you can guarantee that the devil in the details is taken care of because those standard forms leave very little room to negotiate, and it's hard to understand. So I would suggest, maybe not on a $60,000 property, but if you're going to start doing these 5 to 25 units, I suggest you get an attorney that can draft it that's going to protect you. I hope that answers part of your question. Yeah.
One of my friends that we were talking, so I've had the partner that doesn't do crap. I've had that one. And I think one of the things that he taught me, one of my friends was right at the beginning, while you're doing the dating, it's important to talk about the divorce because every LLC or partnership is going to end some way. And if you don't talk about that right away at the beginning, then you're going to have to figure it out later on, and then it's like a lot more expensive.
Beautiful. 100%. If you have a good attorney, they're going to draft an operating agreement for your partnership. You're going to have another legal document, which nobody likes, and it's going to say, me and this guy or this girl, we're partners, and here's our operating agreement. And a good attorney will put in there a buy-sell agreement. And the buy-sell agreement says, if we break up, here's how it goes. And then you don't have to worry about what was discussed at Starbucks when you were hungover on a Thursday, or a Friday or a Saturday or whatever. You have it in writing. It's right there. So I love that point. Make sure it's clarified what the partnership is, both in the fruitful situations and in the breakups. That's a great point. Yeah.
Just a quick question. If you have a deal that has hard money and you need to exit it, what's a creative way to get out of that and switch the funding?
Yeah, great question. Well, first off, I love the question, and this isn't, you have to have a plan. You don't want our loans for longer than 6 months. You don't. So you have to have a plan. So as part of the plan, you have to make sure you feel good about the underwriting and where the property will be at the end. When I say that our clients only have our loans for 4 months, it's because they had the plan. They knew if they bought it for $100K and they put $50K into it, they could sell it for $250K. Now the sale is you know what a sale is? You're going to make money. What you should make sure of is that it will be worth $250 when you're done, and get that bank ready to go. There's two main ways to do this. A local bank who says, I'll give you the loan, or there are DSCR loans, debt service coverage ratio loans, where they won't even look at you as a borrower. They do, but they don't really value you as a borrower. They value the asset. And they say, I will give you this loan because that asset's awesome. I don't know much about you, but that asset is awesome. That asset is awesome. And so that is the two most common ways, other than selling, is to make sure you have that bank and understand that at $250, you're going to feel comfortable getting that $180,000 loan. You only have $150 with us, and therefore you feel very comfortable. I feel like that's a little obvious, so forgive me if I didn't answer your question in full, but you want to make sure you have that end goal in mind and you have a comfort level there.
Hi. So first, I just want to comment, there are definitely some unknowledgeable, shitty agents out there. There's also some that are very educated on these topics, and we may already have really great rapport with our sellers that we have been building for years and years and years. So I think sometimes it's good to not start out the gate with this agent's not going to know shit, and maybe really explain what kind of deal can be made, and we can explain that to our seller who already trusts us. Just one thought on that. And
100%.
then question is, when you're doing like 2 offers, like you say you always put in 2 offers, do you verbal them always, or do you send 2 contracts? Like kind of just a contract question.
Sure. To rescue what I said earlier, if I've provided the wrong theme, I love agents.
Oh my God, no, I just wanted to say
that do their job.
I was not salty. I just wanted to explain.
That seems salty, girl.
It ain't salty. You would know if it was salty.
To be honest, there are shitty attorneys, there are shitty doctors, there are shitty plumbers, and there are shitty agents. And I'm not saying any of them are bad.
100%.
The most important part is to build that rapport, and you're right. The good ones will help it. In fact, again, I will name Stephen Ward. He has helped us buy a handful of deals. Ted helped me get started. He underwrote, he found the contracts, he negotiated the contracts. I basically should have given him the damn deal. He did everything for me on my first deal. Stephen Ward has talked me out of deals. How odd is that for an agent?
Yeah.
The agent that's going to make a bunch of money who says, I'd stay away from this one. That's somebody you want to trust.
Some of us are like that. We
there are
want
good ones.
Our clients to win,
Yeah.
even if it isn't the biggest dollar in our pocket.
Because it's not a transaction relationship. You want to sell that person 30 deals over the next 5 years, not one. Back to how do I offer it? In an LOI format.
Got it. With the 2.
A letter of intent. An LOI is a letter of intent. I ask the agent often, and I say, can I do this in a bullet point email? Or sometimes if it's a little bigger complex, it needs to look formal. And so I'll say, here's my LOI with my letterhead. Here's option 1. I'm going to buy it from you for $200,000. Here's option 2. I'll buy it from you for $250,000 for a $50,000 seller carry. And then I will send that to the agent. And then I will call the agent and I'll say, can we walk through this so that when you explain this to the buyer, no disrespect, maybe you understand everything, I just want to let you understand where I'm coming from.
And then is there a ratio? How do you decide how much you ask the seller to carry on a deal?
As much as possible.
Okay. There's no if you're offering we would only ask for 10% of sellers.
You got to find out, it's a good question. You got to find out how much equity there is. Now, first off, sometimes you don't know that answer. They don't want to tell you sometimes, right? I don't want to tell you how much my loan is. But if you can get an idea of how much is there, you know how much to offer. What I usually start with, if I can't get that information, I'll start at 25%. And the reason I start 25% is because that's my down payment.
Got it. There's ways for agents to find out how much they took loans out for. Just a note.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think CoStar, MLS, yeah. So it's just important you understand that. There was one more over here, and I know I'm going over time, so I took some of Colin's time. Thanks, bud.
We'll do one more question here.
Yep.
Where's the question?
Right here.
When structuring a seller finance deal with multiple funding sources, how do you secure your private money lender's position in that deal?
So the way hard money works, private money, or raising money from anybody, is that you need to make sure it's underwritten. You feel very good about what you have. You're selling something. You're selling something to a bank. You're selling something to an investor. You're selling something to the private money company. So you make sure you understand the financials of whatever deal you're getting into, and you approach that hard money or the bank as if you were going to raise money from them, because in effect you are. And so you say, look, I'm buying this for 200. Here's 4 other comps that says it's worth 350 if I just put 50K into it. And you think about putting yourself in front of a room like this, trying to explain why this deal right here is the one you need to give me money for. And so you're selling yourself, but you're selling the project. So when you approach somebody for hard money, or the bank, or an investor, you need to be able to articulate why them lending you money or them investing with you is actually going to make sense. And again, I feel like that's a general answer, so if there's a follow-up, please ask it, but that is the biggest thing, is you want to make sure you're selling that position in an accurate way by providing comps, pro formas, or whatever.
Like, for example, there was a deal that I wanted to take down. It was a fourplex. I wanted to get money from the city. I wanted to use my private money lenders funds also, and then potentially some hard money in that deal.
Yeah, so, okay, great one to end on here. So what's your name?
Cameron.
Cameron here had a 4-unit he wanted to look at. I don't know if you heard him or not. And not only did he have a 4-unit he was looking at to buy, but he had about 38 things he had to do before that could close. What I would suggest you do in that situation is make sure you have a very safe due diligence runway where you can make sure those boxes are checked. Now, what you don't want to do, and there's a guy that would never show up to any of these, but he is from Omaha, and he's probably no longer doing deals here because he was notorious for being the highest bidder, and then he'd back out of every contract during due diligence because he couldn't wholesale it to somebody. Nothing wrong with wholesaling either. And in fact, screw the state for saying that's illegal. Sorry, agents, I think this is jacked up. If you wholesale something, you should be able to. But regardless, if you're authentic, if you're saying, guys, this is my plan, I need these 4 things to line up, I need to talk to the city, tell the seller that if you need to. And oftentimes you'll need to, if you say, I need 60 days due diligence, and they keep saying, I'm 45. Say, I have a meeting with the city in 40 days. So I'd like to have at least 2 weeks after that. And just explain your situation. So use due diligence to make sure your ducks are in a row, but don't even send an LOI until you feel pretty good that if those boxes are checked, it's going to work. Because you don't want to put something under contract and be that guy that backs out all the time. You'll never get a deal again. Cool. Thanks, guys. I appreciate your time.
Everybody, let's give Chris another round of applause, everybody.
There we go.